All right, welcome to A Growing Concern. We're going to talk tonight with Dani Dennenberg. She's program director for the Humane Education Advocates Reaching Teachers in Portland, which is HEART, HEART. We're going to talk a little bit about what that organization does and some of the campaigns and that they're involved in. Their website, we'll probably put that up a few times, is teachhumane.org. So, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
It took a while to put this together.
It
so
did.
busy lives. And so this organization that you're the Portland program director, I take it that's either a national or international organization as well as just Portland?
It's actually a national organization. It's based in New York City, so it's got its roots in Chicago and New York, where they're thriving chapters. And then there's a little tiny chapter in Indianapolis that's connected with the Peace Learning Center there. Mm-hmm. So it's a really beautiful partnership they have. And about a year ago, they asked me to launch the West Coast version of this chapter and get it up and developed and running. And so I'm essentially running a one-woman show here in Portland.
All right. So,
yeah.
So Teach Humane is the Portland chapter?
So we call it Heart Portland. So they kind of go by each geography, each geographical site. And we've got our own personality here in Portland, and the programs that we do and the teaching that we do is very specific to local issues and regional issues, and I think that makes it a little more meaningful when we're in schools in particular.
Meaning it is more local, you mean?
Yeah, I think that kids can connect with what's happening on the Willamette River versus what's happening on the Hudson River, or what's happening with global warming right here in this city versus what's happening internationally. I mean, we're always trying to connect the local to the global, but I think kids really feel that sense of making a difference when they know the impact of what they're doing. And that can come in various forms, and I can tell you about how we do that.
Well, all politics, they say, are local, so because everything, especially with something like global warming, becomes political.
Absolutely.
Almost immediately. So what is exactly, you mentioned the word teaching, what exactly is the Humane Education Advocates Reaching Teachers in Portland? What is that exactly?
It's a mouthful.
It's a mouthful.
That's what it is.
I've given up trying to remember it, so
I know.
For now. Eventually it'll come along.
Yeah, and it makes it sometimes challenging to kind of, we just use the acronym of HEART, which is beautiful because really what we're doing is we're teaching from the heart. We're teaching young people to live from their hearts, because really in our culture we spend a whole lot of time in our heads and not a lot of time fostering respect and compassion and values that we say we strive for. And what humane education does is it asks people, the definition of humane is to possess the best of human qualities. And usually with any audience that we pose that question to, they come up with respect and compassion and humor and integrity and wisdom and you name it. There's kindness. And that list is virtually the same list regardless of socioeconomic background, religious background, gender, age. And we find that time and time again that list it's really the core list of values that we say we strive for. And yet humane education says, are we living according to that list with respect to how we treat our planet, with respect to how we treat other living beings, other species,
other countries.
So, and one of our programs is Circle of Compassion. We talk about who's in our circle of compassion and who do we exclude from the circle of compassion, and why. Why is it that usually the further removed we get from someone, the more anonymous we become, the less accountable or responsible we feel about how our actions affect people on the other side of the world. Well,
that's the first thing a country does when it wants to go to war, is it alienates a culture or a religion or a nationality, and that's it. They're the out crowd. That's the first step.
Yep, label and kind of marginalize and stereotype, and there you have a whole us and them kind of mentality. So that's what we're trying to break down. Is we look at issues as controversial as factory farming, animals used in experimentation, global warming, sweatshops. Some of these issues I think are becoming a little more, I don't want to say mainstream, but there's Well, in a sense, the awareness around the issues has grown, but the awareness doesn't always meet the action that people take around those issues, and that's really what we're trying to do. Is we're really doing behavioral change, because we're saying, well, we want to inform you, we want to inspire and empower you, and we also want to give you the tools to really actually engage in your communities and do what we think of as civic engagement, and that often comes in the form of service learning, where we're getting kids to actively, build gardens at their schools and write letters to their local representatives, and really, really beautiful forms of action that I think are often that we, many people I think chalk up to, is it really going to make a difference in the big picture? And we have about 6 different ideas that we address in the beginning of our program, and we talk about the 6 barriers is how we refer to it. And those barriers are someone else will take care of this problem. If this problem were big enough, someone would have done something about it already. I'm one person, how much difference can I make? And on and on and on. And so the lens of our program is we do a series of 10 programs typically, and we start with that foundation where kids can constantly come back to, oh, is this a variation of someone else can take care of this problem because it's not my responsibility?
That's very clever, yeah.
It's great, because if you have that it's almost like an agreement that you make with young people to say, we're going to look through this lens. We're going to take this lens and expand it into all these other issues. And we start with that program that I was describing earlier, the Circle of Compassion. Mm-hmm. And we see it grow over the course of the weeks that we spend with these kids. And it does require a lot of patience and a lot of faith that that this is, making a difference in a big system that is, in many ways, Humane Education is trying to change the whole paradigm of education, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Paradigm, I think, is overused, but
it's interesting, because I like that process that you're using, because it's good to come at people and do the positive things, but if there's these negative things that you're talking about, let somebody else do it, or all that, what difference can I make? Those negative things have to be dealt with before people can even hear the positive things.
Absolutely.
Before they even wrap their mind around it, it seems like to me.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. And it really, I think it's as much as it's education, it's psychology, because it's really knowing how people's minds work. And if you're going into a program where there are those types of beliefs, then, and surely I've had my own experiences of those beliefs myself, and I'm very forthright with students in saying I have at times thought all of these things, because the most important thing that we can do is be real with these students and really say, we've been there, we've had these thoughts and doubts before, and it's very easy to get trapped in that kind of thinking.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, you keep mentioning teaching, so do you set it up with schools or with specific classrooms to go in there and address existing classes, I would think?
Yeah, so we do K through 12, and we essentially do in school, after school. We do everything from assemblies to clubs to, in the spring we're going to be working with Portland Parks and Rec with their teen services, and then we just did.
So it isn't just schools then?
No, and in fact, one of the reasons why we're moving in an unconventional direction is because much of because we do have barriers trying to get into schools, not so much because of the content, but because teachers are strapped for time. It's mostly a time issue. It's mostly perceiving it as an add-on, even though there's a mandate in the state of Oregon that actually says humane education is supposed to be taught through, I think it's a morality and ethics is how that's phrased. It's a little statute that says this is supposed to be happening in elementary schools, and we're supposed to be talking about at least humane treatment of animals, which is just one component of what we do. But it's it's getting through that mindset of I don't have time to teach compassion and respect, which is a really crazy concept.
Especially respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just so sorely missing. I feel like this is what school should be. This is what education should be. Are these these qualities and these values.
That they're supposed to be getting at home, you'd think, anyway.
Yeah, and I don't think it's all schools that are responsible. I think it's homes, I think it's communities, I think it's schools, which are part of community. But we mostly target K through 12 programming, and then we train teachers as well. And then we do consultations. We kind of do a try approach to humane education, and we essentially do most of our programming through my personal network of colleagues and people who I know in Portland who have connections in high schools, and it's grown from there. People are actually starting to hear about her, which is wonderful.
And you also do clubs and things too, you said.
We do.
Like say, just for instance, Audubon Society maybe or something.
Yeah.
And organizations, different institutions.
Any school that has or community organization, whether it's the Girl Scouts Club, that's actually one of the places we'd like to spend some time doing some work. Portland Parks and Rec, we just started a new partnership at the library through Multnomah County Library at the Belmont branch. We're doing a whole series on human rights issues, and that's for teenagers. So it's like an 8th grade cohort. It's mostly 8th graders. So I think technically that's probably preteen. Is that right? Oh no, is that 12? 8th grade?
12, I think so. Yeah.
6th grade is 11, so about 13. Yeah. So
13 is 8th grade, I think. I still use those terms. This K-12, that wasn't going on at all when I was growing up. So it's a whole just translation thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting to me because it seems like when you're teaching these different positions or whatever, you're kind of on a cutting edge between social justice and environment, because you really can't separate those two, even though you can talk about them separately, like you can talk about your kidney and your liver, but it's all one unit.
Absolutely.
And so it's an opportunity to let these children know that that they're connected.
It's an integrated approach, and we're always looking at this of animal-human environment. So we're looking at, even when an issue is, even when we're doing this series at the library around stereotypes, I weave in elements of, well, how do we stereotype other species? How do we stereotype people who are environmentalists? Like, there's a way to kind of bring those elements in with even a series of programs that are just focused on what we perceive as a human rights issue. But we're always looking at, this is a good example. This prop here, I don't know if people can see this.
You raise it up. There you go. They can see that. Yeah.
So this is a food prop. And it's obviously a hamburger, and we do an activity in classes called True Price, where we basically ask students to think about what's the true price of this product with respect to animals, planet, people, pollution, and human health. So our bodies, our spirits, what do we we emphasize a little less of the spiritual focus that might come in the form of my personal story that I share with kids. But we're looking at, what is this product a want or a need, and where's this idea of a want or a need come from? And just that question within itself is such a powerful question. I was introduced to that 15 years ago when I got trained in humane education, and it's changed the whole way I see the world. And it can oftentimes feel like a burden to carry around that kind of weight of, do I need this product or do I want it? And where does that fall in alignment with the things that I say I care about? If I have respect for our planet, and yet this delicious dessert comes, foiled in a bunch of plastic wrap that I know is going to end up in some body of water, or shipped across to Asia to be processed. So it's constantly asking that series of questions, and also feeling, lively and joyful about life too, without kind of getting dispirited by the weight of these choices.
Right.
So balance.
That's what the humor you're teaching is all about, right?
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
To dispel that.
It's a big part of it.
Well,
lots of laughter.
We've been talking for almost 15 minutes here, and it's a great conversation. And I ran across a video on Facebook a while back, and it's actually put out by Rainforest Action Network. That's ran.org, and we'll mention them as we go through the program as well, because they do a lot of good work. And this is something that you are working on and teaching children, but it's a really good example of the interface between social justice and an environment, and how what we use, how it has consequences. So if they're ready to put that up there, we'll give that a try. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
Ready?
Orangutans can't speak for themselves, but if they could, they would tell us that much of the palm oil used in America's snack food is being grown by cutting down rainforests that are orangutans' only home. But we can stop it. By telling brands that use palm oil there's a better way. We'll use our customer power to demand change before it's too late. The power is in your palm.
And the power of communication, whether it's between people or between people and animals, and I wish we could teach all animals sign language. I mean, they've developed an incredible amount of vocabulary. I've seen it more with chimps than with orangutans, but still, they can understand us through sign language, and they make up sentences. And just, this is somewhat contrived, but the fact that the orangutan can communicate like that is not contrived.
No, and it's really, I mean, that's really what we're doing in so many ways, is trying to get young people and people in general to see there's another language beyond the human language, and another whole species, hundreds and thousands of species who are affected by these simple choices, like a jar of Jif peanut butter. I just showed this video to a group of 6th through 8th graders over at Jackson Middle School, and they went from cynical and goofing off to serious to empowered to, I'm going to write that pound in your palms number down on my hand, or sentence down on my hand, and I'm going to tweet this. And they all started getting online, and they started brainstorming ways that they could actually make a YouTube video to address this issue. Within like 10 minutes, this had transformed this group of kids. And so the next period I have with them, I'm gonna, make this video with them so they can educate probably their peers about this issue.
Well, kids they're young. They don't know all the reasons why something can't be done, so they can do it. Absolutely.
The sky is the limit for them. And one of the stories I shared with them was about 2 Girl Scout members who had addressed this issue of palm oil in Girl Scout cookies, and who had taken this issue all the way through national media, and they had taken this conversation all the way to Girl Scouts International or Girl Scouts of America, and had a conversation with the higher ups, and the company is slowly, like molasses, but still listening and moving in the direction of actually changing some of their ways. So RAN is a great organization to be working with, and we're essentially using that issue as a way to connect animal, people, planet. So as you saw in the video, it's an orangutan issue, but it's a deforestation issue, it's a climate change issue. The industry's rife with human rights abuses. There's an article that came out in Bloomberg Business Week, I believe, I want to say it was July or August of this year, that focused just on the human rights abuses in the industry. So if anybody wants to check that out, that's a good place to go.
Well, there's also people that live in those jungles as well.
Yeah,
and a lot of other animals. They may not be as warm and fuzzy as an orangutan, but it isn't like there's a little bit of forest, and so they can live in that forest. There's a certain number, I forget what it's called, when the populations go below a certain
carrying capacity, or the
so there's 50 or 60 of them. That's not enough to carry them, I guess, for mating and all that. So just because there's a certain amount of them left, it doesn't mean that they're going to survive.
No, I mean it's not sustainable. It's devastating to them. I mean, these pictures I see are just, they tear my heart apart, and it's egregious to me that we cannot let that happen, and that companies are hiding behind labels and behind quote unquote sustainable palm oil. And so we're really getting kids to look at, is this, what is the round table of sustainable palm oil really about, and let's dig a little bit further. Is palm oil a want or a need? Do we really need palm oil?
And there are other substitutes.
So I think it goes beyond, and one of the things we have kids do is write letters to these top 20 snack food companies that RAN has released, and I believe the statistic is 50% of all snack foods in this country have palm oil in them. I mean, it's staggering. It's a staggering number. And one of the things they're trying to do is make this a numbers thing and get this pound in your palm little writing to go viral. And that's supposed to represent the 660,000 orangutans who are left in the wild. So they're trying to get one person per orangutan. So if you want to be one of those people, let me know.
Yeah, all right, I'll do that.
It's a numbers thing.
A couple of things, connecting up a couple of things that you said, I forget what they are now, but I know where that is going, and that is, they're hiding behind. You said that. But what struck me when you said that, and you mentioned earlier that that you do sweatshops, is these recent fires or building collapses where in the east somewhere, and these are collapsing and killing a large amount of their workers who are making almost nothing. And who's hiding behind that are the folks that are buying or paying for these clothes to be made at the Gap and all these different things. And so that's another issue where there's somebody hiding behind something.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if you're dealing with that subject with any of your students yet.
Yes, we just did a program over at the Ivy Montessori School on sweatshops and mostly child migrant issues and food production and children used in the agriculture sector. But the program also touched just briefly on sweatshops. And the kids were, how do we find this information? How do we know? How can we figure this out? We sent them home with a sheet of paper that says researching our stuff, and they go home and they look at, what is the item? Oh, it's a shoe. What brand is it? And where was it made? And we get them to look at labels and really start asking these questions of who makes this product, which all connects back to that whole circle of compassion idea. So we say in our circles, our family and our friends and maybe a couple people outside of that, well, what about the person making the t-shirt that you just bought yesterday? And doing that all in such a way that's not accusatory, that is, doesn't say you're a bad person for buying this product. And also doing it in such a way that, here in Portland, we've got some pretty big companies who've been associated with Sweatshop right in our backyard.
Oh,
so
yeah.
how to have those conversations in a real authentic way without targeting specific companies, and when that's all I want to say is, yeah, but this company, it represents, these types of issues. So it's, coffee is a good example of that. When we're looking at an issue, we're looking at what's shade-grown coffee, and what's what is the true price of a cup of coffee, and
Fair trade versus
fair
free
trade,
yeah.
and all of those things, and we get kids to actually pick up. I don't know if looks like you
There
can
you
see
go.
that.
I can see it all right.
Looks like, so we get kids to actually spend 5 minutes picking up these beans one at a time off the ground, so they can really sense kinesthetically, what does this feel like to do this for just 5 minutes? And then,
Let alone your whole life.
yeah, could you imagine doing this for, 7, 8, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and paid, egregiously low amounts of money, and exposed to toxics and all kinds of things. So, yeah, that's one of the things we do. We try to make it as authentic as possible in a classroom.
Sure.
So,
you mentioned organizations around here. I was shopping at TJ's, Trader Joe's, a while back, and was looking on something that I was buying that said palm oil, and I realized that before I really got into it, this is when I first started getting into it, looking it up, and there was a big campaign against Trader Joe's over that palm oil.
Really?
And it went on and on I haven't checked into it recently, and it turned out that they're owned by, I think, a German company or something. And so you not only have to deal with Trader Joe's, but you have to deal with this
the
parent
larger
company. But even somebody as supposedly social or whatever aware, conscious, they have issues too. They use that in a lot of their pastries and things.
oh my gosh, I mean, it's so I'm vegan, and one of the things that I've discovered is just how much food, even in the vegan world, has organic palm oil in it, or just natural healthy foods at the co-op. It's all over the place. It's just rampant. So trying to kind of, and there are different opinions about it. There's some people who say boycotting is going to push the companies further away. You want to work with them and say, make your procurement policy more transparent versus actually boycotting the company for those products. I tend to personally fall on the boycott line, just because I can't imagine even playing any minute role in supporting an industry that's doing these things around the world. And at the same time, I also know that what's realistic for most kids is not to boycott these top 20 companies, but to write them letters and make phone calls and email them. Yeah, engage them and say, can you please, change my M&Ms, to, take this ingredient out altogether. So it's kind of meeting people where they're at, and also exposing them to it's not watering the curricula down, but it's, it's how to be authentic and real, and also empower at the same time without pushing kids to the point of being paralyzed with, oh my gosh, this is way too much information.
Well, what are some of the other, how would you call it, the postures you've taken, or processes you've gone to bring kids aware of some of these things? Some of these things that they can bring home and surprise their parents about, because the parents aren't aware.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a whole nother segment that we have to be sensitive to, because particularly around food issues, because that's the issue. That's the issue that raises the big red flags, even here in Portland, where people are, kind of, self-labeled kind of foodies and aware of these types of things. I think we still have to be sensitive. I really hesitate to use that word sensitive, because one of the things we do, our whole approach is based around critical thought. So we say we're not here to tell you what to do or what to believe. We're here to inform you about what's happening, so you can make an inspired, informed decision based on your own set of values. So we
develop those values.
Yeah, develop those values, and really, in my dream world, kids would spend like a week just looking at one of those values, and they would say, well, where does compassion show up in my life, and where does it not, and where can I foster that quality more? That's something I personally do, is look at, well, I'm not embodying patience so much here in the car, beeping at people and swerving around them, and and I'm driving a car. Is that in alignment with the planet, even if it's a hybrid, vehicle? So it's constantly asking those questions. But you were asking about how else do we engage. We have a service learning curricula that actually goes beyond our standard curricula, and it gets kids to actually develop their own project from the get-go. They address an issue, and then they take that issue and actually implement a project around it. They choose the issue.
Out of a selection, or they just figure it out for themselves?
We're experimenting with that model where we're going to narrow it down, or we're going to narrow it down to a couple community organizations, say, Fences for Fido, or, you pick a range of People, Animal, Planet, and you say, well, these are the 3 organizations and these are their needs. What project can you come up with that's going to meet their needs? That's a model that we're experimenting with, but that hasn't happened yet. In this particular case, when we launched our service learning curricula at Meek Professional Technical High School, we left it open-ended. It was who and what do you care about, and what do you want to see change? Because really the truth is, if kids aren't, and I think this is just across the board, if people aren't engaged in that process, if they can't, if they're not defining for themselves what the problem is and something that bothers them that they want to see change, again, it's just me coming in and saying this is something that...
Well, it forces them to collaborate, too.
Yes, and that was an amazing part of the process. The first 4 weeks of the curricula is all building conflict resolution and agreement. Like, how do we agree in a group? How do we come to consensus? And these kids it took at times hours for them to really see other perspectives about, well, I want to address this issue. Well, I want to address this issue. We waited for all of those kids to be on board, and they convinced each other, well, this is the issue that we want to address. And at that particular school, they addressed food empowerment or food justice issues, and they created a garden.
Well, you'd try to pick an issue that connected up to most of the other ones, and food does.
Yeah. It takes that whole trail. And the picture that's behind us is of one of the students from that school. We took them to a farmed animal sanctuary called Green Acres. And we're able to, the shift in these kids when they went to this sanctuary was extraordinary. And just watching, I'd kind of just watch from afar.
Like what's there, the chickens.
Yeah, that's a picture I personally took in Southern California, because one of a whole section of my master's degree in humane education was dedicated to animal issues, and as part of that we had to go visit a slaughterhouse, a factory farm, an auction, go see it in person, document it, and actually how I was documenting the veal industry was how I discovered and found my dog Charlie. So that was both a really horrible experience and a beautiful thing at the same time. Yeah.
Well, that ignorance is bliss. And so you're bringing all this stuff to these children. I mean, I imagine it might be causing some stress in their life. Is that turned out to be a good thing? That they're able to integrate that?
That is, we've done assessments that really look at, is this changing, is it going beyond knowledge and actually changing the way kids connect with each other, the way they connect to the world? And we're seeing very positive things at the chapter in New York City. There's a lot of, they did 2 primary assessments that came out very positive, both at a summer camp for disadvantaged young women and a 10 series of lesson plans that took place in a Chicago school, I believe it was. And it's a tall order. We're asking young people to do a lot, and it is, I sometimes personally worry, my gosh, do these kids don't, even though we're going into a school, they don't have a choice about what's being presented to them.
That's true.
They also don't have a choice about what's being presented to them 98% of the time that they're in schools, for the most part, right? So in a standard school, they're getting they're being taught a whole range of of values that are kind of the accepted values of our society.
And they're not even
So-
being taught to them as values. They're just
Right.
kind of in between everything.
Yeah, it's just like this is what it is. Like we just dissect animals, or it's just part of the curricula. It's what you do. And so one of the approaches I take to that is I use that as a disclaimer up front, and I say, we can see where what is being presented would come across as an extreme perspective, but when you consider that we live in a world where we're presented with these just as is values, then this would appear as an extreme. And I ask you to also consider that this is one other perspective. And then I ask them to go do the homework. So I tell them sometimes I don't want you to believe what I say, because I want them to actually go dig it up, go look it up, and beyond Wikipedia, like really actually doing the research about the issues, which could even come in the form of just having conversations, just asking questions about it. So yeah, I think and that's why I personally want to move in the direction of where students actually self-select and come to us because they want to learn about these issues. So I think that's one of the, I actually proposed to one of the local schools to teach an elective course in these issues, and then those kids would actually sign up for it. And they'd pay a nominal fee to be part of it, and that would support my time and energy pulling it all together, and I would know that those kids really actually wanted to be there. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a way around that whole pushing it.
Yeah, they have a little more ownership of it that way. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I see we've gone through almost 36 minutes here, so maybe we
Lucky
have some photographs, and we'll just been playing in the back, so we'll run those photographs, and if we have one that you want to particularly stop and talk about, we can just have them halt that. So if they can run those on the screen. There we go. Just off some of your paperwork.
Yeah.
This is a powerful one here.
That is an egg farm in Southern California, a factory farm. There's a fair trade logo. Let's see, feed 2 birds with 1 scone.
Right, that's pretty good.
Yeah, just the whole idea about changing our perception and language and factoids that we use. We use a lot of photographs like this. This is of the leather industry in India. We use a lot of advertisements. We do media literacy. And
this is a McDonald's advertisement,
yes.
you mean? Pick it apart or something?
Yeah, pick it apart. What's the product advertised? What desires are they aiming at?
The underground message that they're hitting, And this is
that's the garden that got built over at Meek High School. And that's
right.
Naila, who I mentioned earlier, and a rescued horse named Daisy. This was a letter written by a lovely student named Caring Clara, about Packy the elephant at the Oregon Zoo.
Here at the Portland Zoo, right?
Yeah. So, and then there's the
in your palm.
in your palm message that we're trying to get. This is a parody ad, Absolute End. So that's a parody of Absolute. I'd like to talk about this for a second.
Yeah, we can stop this one here.
This is kind of a good one.
Go back to that last one there.
It's kind of maybe it's on the slideshow.
Well, they can run it back.
Maybe we could always
if
go
they
back.
Would.
Oh, it looks like we paused there. We could talk about that too. Oh, yeah.
There they go.
Yeah, so we call this the advertising alphabet, and this is a way for kids to identify just by one letter what company is this one letter. And so if you could, Jim, maybe you want to try with me on that very last line on the very left, the M there.
Oh yeah, M&M, sure.
Yep. Any others that you recognize? Some of these are older too, so.
No, not offhand. Oh, maybe.
Maybe that's a good sign.
Toys R Us, maybe. No.
Yep, there's a Toys R
Us.
There's an Eggo waffles.
Oh, okay, that's the E there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think the I in the middle there of Mind is Dairy Queen, or Ice. Ice. I think it's the Ice company. Needless to say, we use this as a way as an icebreaker to get kids to think about just how many messages and advertisements we're surrounded by just on a daily basis. And if we can compare this image or our quickness in recognizing these brands, could we do the same with native plants and animals? Could we do we
Probably
know
not.
do we know our region well? And I'm actually going to be creating kind of a contrary, something that supplements this
Yeah, like-
with local birds and looking at.
That's a good idea. I think the L might be Lipton's, maybe?
That is Lysol.
Lysol, oh,
Yes, and the O is Oreo and Starburst and
all right. I'll be darned. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean,
So
so we can move on from there.
sure.
I know children especially, they absorb a lot more than we do, and they know the commercials.
Yeah.
They know commercials.
And they actually get excited and they laugh when they do this, and it kind of becomes, it's a good way to get them to address a serious issue by laughing. So choices cards, these are different choices we give kids to look through. What choice does the most good and the least harm? Walking, riding, biking, taking transit, driving a car. This is a little example of circle of compassion that one kid did. This is a kid from Creative Science School. And then again, another logo, the cruelty-free logo. This is a photo we use to show what's called the Dre's eye irritancy test, one of the tests that's done to test products and household care products on animals.
We've been through it. I guess we can come back to the studio now
Sure.
and maybe just put that horse behind us. I think that was a great shot. That was the one you chose to keep that permanently behind us. Well, I had a couple things to talk about from there, and I just kind of, I was really happy to see talking about fair trade.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk that to adults and their eyes glaze over. They don't really understand the connection, and it's good, I think, if you can do that. If you can do that to children and make it connect up to their life.
Yeah, and
It's not that obtuse. It's not that complicated.
No, and one of the things, like coffee can feel a little abstract to them because they're like, what, I'm in 6th grade, I'm not drinking coffee. So you can talk about it either as a way for them to influence their parents and have conversations. You can talk about it as a way to, as you get older, you can make these choices. What choices can you make now? You could use it as a way to, the way I talk about fair trade is through soccer balls, because soccer is such a big sport here, and there are balls that are made, using child labor throughout the world. Pakistan's a good example of that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, sewn, hand stitched by incredibly young kids in egregious conditions.
Well, that's why how so many things in our society is cheap.
Yep.
Because of that.
Cheap labor,
Yeah.
just transferred elsewhere. It's out of the sight of most people.
Mass produced, so people have to run that machinery.
Yep. And we often get our audiences to look at social change and how long it takes for change to really happen, but that it has happened. And we call it the circle of moral concern, and it's a different approach to that circle of compassion that I was talking about earlier, because it's a way for them to see different movements that have addressed injustices in our society.
Like women's suffrage
Yep,
or
women's
slavery.
Exactly, and you can use everything in there. LGBTQ issues. You can use the Clean Water Act and some of the environmental legislation that didn't exist. You can use child abuse laws, that weren't in place until, what was it? I should know this off the top of my head. I think it's 80 years ago, weren't around. And I mean that's the concept of that. When people really see that, is astounding. So they get to look at, this is a present day version of that, and so that's the way I often connect it, is through a soccer ball and talking about the fair. I bring in a fair trade stamped soccer ball. And I talk about, what does it mean to play? What does it mean that we have this freedom to not only play this sport and to buy this product? Bless you. But what does it mean that a child on the other side of the world doesn't get to go to school, doesn't get family time, has maybe even been sold into labor by their parents? I mean, it's a vicious cycle.
Because the parents are so poor
because
that
they're
is
so
the only
desperate.
viable,
Yeah.
or even into prostitution, which is even worse.
Yeah, and we talk about we haven't addressed that specific issue, although there's a mention of it in the video that we show about child labor in classrooms. So a very brief mention of it, but that's the way approach that topic with kids. And I show them lots of labels, and I get them to look at ingredients, and I get them to ask questions based on what they see on a package, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun bringing in these props. It becomes a little less abstract when they can look at something and see, excuse me. And we also talk a lot about equity issues. Can everybody afford to buy fair trade? Or is that a myth? That to shop organically is more expensive. So we really look at who is oppressed, and what kind of systems that allow for this oppression to begin with. If you look at the most marginalized people and just the advertising that surrounds them in the neighborhood, and you look at the lack of access they have to fresh, clean food. Even here in Portland, there was a whole food desert map that was done.
Yeah.
And, it was virtually the same kind of thing. Most of the people who lived inner city, close here in Metro, had, New Seasons or Whole Foods or, healthy option, even places like Fred Meyer's who have
good organic section.
Yeah. Are these places accessible? Do they carry anywhere near what these other places carry? And the answer to that was no. On many
well, you have your
levels,
ingredients, but you also have your nutrition too on that label.
Yeah.
And that would let folks know that the good and bad parts of all that. We do need salt, but how much do we need? And you can get into a lot of issues with that too. Bringing in health as you get older.
Yes, yeah, and really one of the things I'd like to do, or one of the things I have spent a little time doing over at one of the local synagogues, is I've done like food demos, and I've shown them, sustainable food. What does it look like to cook sustainably, and what does it look like to cook your own food, and do you have to wait until you become an adult to do this? And really making it fun and simple, and really showing how inexpensive and delicious plant-based food can be, and kind of getting rid of a lot of those misrepresentations and myths about what it means to be on a vegan diet. And you have to get your meat from you have to get your protein from the beef industry, and again, that all leads back into advertisements and like where the food guide pyramid, and how that all gets influenced, and lobbyists who shape those guidelines, and it's quite the trail.
While you've been talking about teaching these children, I wonder what type of feedback have you had, either through the children or through their parents, from the parents, when these kids come home with all this information that a lot of it maybe they didn't know, or maybe they did, but they weren't implementing it in their lives. So has it been any feedback? Has it been positive?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few positive feedbacks, mostly in the schools where we have the support of the teachers. So in the after-school programming, it's a little loose and harder to track that information, because often there's the lack of school support and some other barriers that make it a little challenging. But in the evaluations that we've been getting from teachers, definitely positive. One of the things we're going to start implementing are easy to implement evaluations for students themselves, because that's something I used to do as a humane educator with my old organization. But for the most part, what we're doing is focusing on teacher evaluations and what changes have you seen in your students. The most positive feedback that we've experienced was at Meek Professional Technical High School, the alternative high school crowd.
That would make sense.
They were so receptive. These kids were so, and they were, it took a while for them to gain my trust, or for them to gain trust in me as a person coming into the school.
Sure. And
once we kind of broke some of those barriers down, the dialogue and the conversation started becoming more authentic, and so for the most part positive. And there are also ways in which I feel like some of what we're doing has to be modified and changed to be more effective, and part
less
of that
confrontational, possibly.
Yeah, I don't know if it's less confrontational as much as it is spending more time actually talking about these issues. So I feel like we go into a classroom and we spend an hour talking about child migrant and sweatshop issues, or let's say animal homelessness and factory farming. We're combining both of those into one lesson plan, into 1 hour. And that's a lot of information. That's like in my perspective, it's overload. So one of the things that I'm going to be doing is looking at extending that series, and that's why I want to spend time doing these elective courses, because then students are coming to you and you're getting more time beyond the hour scope. But yeah, I definitely don't shy away from the controversial. I mean, it's definitely, these issues are so severely underrepresented in our dialogue that I feel like if I can be a voice for them, I will. In our media.
Yeah, so,
hugely.
Well, we're down to like a little less than 9 minutes already, so I thought we might put up the phone.
Great.
And if people want to call in, maybe
call
so, maybe not. But while we're waiting for that and the light flashes on, then we know we have a phone call. People can get a hold of you and your organization. How? Through the teachhumane.org site, I would imagine.
Yes, teachhumane.org, and my personal email address, which is dani@teachhumane.org. And they can also call our office at 503-957-9016. And they can follow us on our Facebook page too, which if you type in Humane Education Advocates Reaching Teachers in Portland, it will pop up and you can follow us there. It's
probably Humane Education Advocates would probably do it.
I think so. I think
Something
once you get
like
those
that.
first 2 or 3 letters in there, it pops up.
Sure, and we'll probably get that number up there eventually. Maybe they picked it up. Maybe we'll mention it another time. There's a phone number to call in.
Great.
So folks, I would encourage people to get in contact if you know of an organization, or you yourself, your children, go to a school that have never availed themselves of this great organization, and the compassion and the different things that just kind of come right out of what they're doing. It's incredible that children are brought up not to think critically, not to connect up. They're just brought up to consume and to basically consume. And that's what's going on in society right now. We're ramping up to Christmas. That's going to be what it's all about, the mania to consume. Oh, we got a phone call already.
Oh, yay.
First caller, you're on the air. Welcome to the program. First call is usually a little bumpy here. So, first caller, you're on the air. Guess you're not. Hello?
Okay, I can't hear you now, but
Can you hear me now?
yeah, now I can hear you.
Oh, great. I hear you well.
Okay, good. So anyway, thanks a lot. It was a great show, really, really good. And I just want to mention that myself and Dani are going to be doing a discussion this Sunday after a free film showing at the Downtown Library in Portland. It's called How I Became an Elephant.
Yes.
And
All
so
right.
after the showing, Dani and I will both speak and clue people into the local issues about the elephants in our zoo. So I just wanted to mention that, Jim. It's 2 o'clock this Sunday at the Downtown Library. And thanks again for a great show.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you for the call. So that's 2
Okay.
o'clock.
Wonderful.
2 o'clock Sunday at
love
the
it.
Downtown Library, one of them little rooms there. And
Yep. We're hoping to attract as many people as possible, so hopefully you're one of them. Not you personally, but you're welcome to come to the event too.
And that's the folks out there. I mean, elephants are very, we talked a lot about elephants in the past. Courtney has been on, and we always talk about not the warm and the fuzzy or the very super intelligent animals, but they're all intelligent. They all have emotional lives. Maybe not much for a slug or a paramecium or something, but still, there's a connection in the animal world that we can at least begin to delve into through some of these very charismatic animals.
Yeah, and the way I see, it's interesting just hearing you say that. The way I kind of see humane education is like it's a mindfulness thing. So it's we may not have a whole lot of compassion for slugs or respect for slugs, but we can still respect them, or we can be fearful of spiders and save them, and so it's I think
respect that they have a connection to everything else.
Yeah, that they're part of our ecological web.
Right, and we have another call. Next caller.
All right.
Hello, you're on the air. Welcome to the program.
Yes, excellent program, excellent ideas, everything. One question I had is for the lady there. In schools, you get feedback from parents who take the view that we are above all animals, so we can do with them what we like. I found this being an attitude that is more prevalent than one could think, particularly for people who hate vegetarians, or rather have some, by principle, some kind of issue with people who are vegetarians. Do you find negative feedback on that extent or not? And have you tried to counteract it? Excellent show. I will go to leave room for others. Thank you.
Thank you for the call.
Great.
The whole Bible dominion thing.
Yes.
They want the dominion, but they don't want to have the responsibility. They want the privilege, but not the responsibility.
Yeah, and I think the way that I approach that in a couple of ways. So to answer the question, yes, we do get that perspective often. And I see it a lot in high school kids, more so than I do in elementary and middle school. So I see this kind of, and I see it more so in young men than I do in young women. So I kind of see it kind of broken down just based on my 15 years of doing this, that's often the demographic. And I often just ask, where does that idea come from? Where do we get this idea? I just get them to question. So, just because I hear this, or just because I learn this at my church, or just because I learn this here, doesn't make it valid. So I ask that question, where does the belief come from? Just to put that concept or that idea out there of questioning our own beliefs. Just because we hear something doesn't make it valid. So that's one place I start. And then the other place I start as I talk about that word dominion and how we've misrepresented that concept, and we've taken that word to mean domination as opposed to dominion, which was the original idea of that was care and responsibility and acting with kindness.
Or like the bumper sticker says, don't believe everything you think.
Yes.
So I think we have another call in
Great.
about 3 minutes. Well, the next call, this is probably the last call. You have about a minute.
Hi, thank you so much. I tuned in late. Thank you very much about the discussion about palm oil. I had no idea. What are we supposed to do to help stop all of this? What is your action suggestion? I'm going to hang up and listen to your answer. Thank you.
Yes.
Great show, Jim.
Thank you.
So couple things. Number one, you've already started by caring about the issue, so that's the first action. The second is visiting the RAN.org website, the Rainforest Action Network website. They can tool you into or plug you into everything that's going on in their national campaign. And you can join the Portland Palm Oil Action Group, which my sister and I are heading up. And you can email me at Dani, D-A-N-I, at teachhumane.org to sign up on that little list. And we're writing letters to companies and essentially just trying to make it an awareness thing and spreading as much information, just like this show did for you. I'm glad that, if anything, it educated one person about that issue. And then to look at your own personal consumption choices. So I would start there too and look through your cupboard, make it a fun field trip.
Look at the ingredients here. So that's where it all starts to me. Is look, because you'd be surprised how much palm oil is in canola oil and these different things.
Yeah, and it's also labeled different things. So we can set you up with what are the many labels that it goes under. It's not just palm oil. It goes by 5 or 6 other.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I can, unfortunately I don't have that fact sheet. We can't throw that up, but we could put it on our Facebook page, or anybody can email me for it, or go to the RAN website and they have the fact sheets there too. So they're a great resource.
All right, so they can get a hold of you where now?
They can get a hold of me at teachhumane.org, the website, at Dani, D-A-N-I, at teachhumane.org. They can also call at 503-957-9016.
That's 957?
9016.
9016. Well, all right. That gives us, a little over 30 seconds here. I want to thank the crew, so I don't want to forget that. I want to thank the callers, great callers. There's that Downtown Library, 2 o'clock on Sunday.
2 o'clock on Sunday, yes. And you can keep abreast of our other events on our Facebook page. It's a good place to plug in.
All right. So that was a Facebook page. Is just type in Humane Education Advocates. It should pop up. I doubt there's any other organizations that start off with those words.
No.
All right. Well, last of all, thank you very much for coming on the
Jim.
program. I'm
It's
glad
an
we were
honor.
able to put this together. Great conversation. I learned a lot, and
I did
I
too.
hope that the viewers got turned on to some things they didn't know about, and they're going to take action. Thanks
Wonderful.
for tuning in.